Hi, everyone. It is Jamie Joe right here at MadLit Musings, and I have with me today award-winning author. Find her books in Target, Toni Shiloh. Hey, Toni.
Hey.
It's always a huge thing when all of a sudden you're like, you can get my books in Target. Like you can actually walk into the store and get my book. That's a big accomplishment.
Yeah, it feels so real. And um, I probably feel like a dork when I go into Target and like, look, it's my book.
I don't think you should feel like a dork. I think you should feel accomplished and proud. And then just stand there with an extra oversized magic marker and be like, I'm signing books at Target.
Definitely.
Every author's dream is to wind up in Target. Who cares about the New York Times bestsellers list, right? We don't need that. We need our book in Target.
Exactly, because there's nothing better than knowing you can go into Target, get all the things you don't need, and then swing by the bookstore and see your own books there.
Exactly. I was reading a Facebook post of a relatively famous author, and she was going to a book signing or something, and she realized she had forgotten some of her books. So she ran to Target, bought all the books in their stock so she could have them for her book signing. And I'm like, that's classic. Like, let me
That
buy the
is so
books so I
awesome.
can sell you the books and sign them.
But that's so cool that she was able to run a Target and do that.
Right.
Like,
Right. That is cool.
yeah, goals.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Hashtag goals. Oh, fun. Well, this is your book. Your book is A Run at Love, and it is out now, so everybody can get it. And it looks really good. I mean, you've got all kinds of topics. Like you answered my question, like, what could we talk about? And there's this list of topics. I'm like, what? How do you fit all of that into one book?
That's a good question. I think I pulled out my hair a lot. Um, there is weeping and gnashing of the teeth,
Okay, that's fair.
you know, the
Yep,
usual.
yep. The usual that, goes into every book. I don't know if readers realize how much blood, sweat, and tears go into some novels.
Yeah, I think they think we're being ex that we're exaggerating when we say that, but no,
Hmm.
there was
Hmm.
lots of tears this round for this book.
Aw.
But I think it made it more rewarding
Okay.
when I got the finished product. I was like, we made it. Me and the characters, we made it through.
Made it. Oh, that's awesome. So tell us a little bit about what the book is about before we dive into some of those other topics.
I would love to. So, A Run at Love tells the story between Piper and Tuck. They are best friends, have been since childhood. Piper is a transracial adoptee, so she's African, and her parents are Caucasian Americans, and they adopted her from the fictional country of Aloro, Italy. And she's grown up basically as the only one in our house that's African American, the only one in a lot of her schooling, the town, and she owns a racehorse, so she's minority in the derby world.
Mm.
So it's a lot about her finding her identity. Um, and there's family drama, and of course, there's the friends to more relationship between her and Tuck.
Her and Tuck. Awesome. Now, I might have missed it. You might have said that she and Tuck have known each other for years. So this is
Yes,
kind of a friends to lovers type of a story.
exactly.
Okay. All right. That's cool. How do you how do you go from transracial adoption to the Kentucky Derby? I mean, not that that couldn't happen, but it's not the two things that I would put in a book together, like just naturally.
I know it's funny because so the way this story idea came to me, Piper came first.
Okay.
I saw her in my head. She was riding a horse, and I was like, wow, a black woman on a horse.
Yeah.
Um, you don't see that too often. And so I just kind of the way I work ideas is I just kind of sit with it.
Hmm.
Um, and my brain just asks all the questions like how'd she get there? What's she doing? Like what are her hopes and dreams? And it just made sense to me that she was adopted by white parents, ended up in Kentucky, horse world,
Okay.
and she's seen it all her life. So there's, I think, a line I put in there where it's maybe not in her blood, but it's in her adopted DNA.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool. I like that.
so
Yeah.
she loves it. And I just, from there,
Hmm.
asked all the questions to get from transracial adoption to the Kentucky Derby.
Kentucky Derby. Yeah. I love it. I love it. I love that they're meshing together because I think it's a collision of two topics that need to mesh together and is really cool. Although I will say, I know absolutely nothing about the Kentucky Derby except the hats. That I mean, if you ask me about the Kentucky Derby, it's not horses. It's like, what's with the hats?
Yeah, that was totally me before I decided to write it. And
Okay.
then I think I got overwhelmed. Not I think I got overwhelmed by all the information. And I was
Hmm.
like, I really know nothing about the Kentucky Derby.
It's really kind of, if I understand, it's like this long historical ancestry, not just in ownership of the horses, but the horses itself themselves. Like the horses have their ancestries and the sire and the
Yep.
all of
They,
that. That's about as much as I know, but
yeah, they definitely care about the lineage the
Mhm.
horse is coming from because that Um, because it's all a gamble, really.
Right.
Like life, we don't know what's going to happen when you take, this person with that person. It's the same
Right.
thing, horse world. They hope that having winning parents will then make a colt a winner in itself, but
Mhm.
you just never know.
Yeah.
So I found that interesting. And the horse she Piper ends up buying, um, the same way. Its previous owners basically considered the horse that died, but she sees potential.
Oh,
So she takes a gamble on it when she buys Dream. And then, of course, she gets tucked to train the horse. And
mhm.
then the road to the Derby itself, it all starts in September, all the horse races.
Okay.
Uh, and I didn't realize it went on for so long because, you hear about the Derby and it's in May, and that's all I
Right.
knew.
Right.
But there's tons of horse races that lead up to that. So
Okay.
there's a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds like you opened a vortex of the horse world that you probably weren't expecting. I wouldn't have been expecting it myself.
Yeah, definitely. But by the end, I was surprised at how much the knowledge stayed in my mind, if that makes
That's cool.
sense.
Yeah, no, totally.
Um, so it was one of those things like, I actually researched this, I
Mhm.
learned it, and I could watch the Derby and with that excitement of, oh my goodness, like I've invested time in
Yeah.
it. And so now I really want to know the outcome.
Now you're actually invested in the Kentucky Derby yourself too.
Exactly.
Did you get one of the hats? Did you get a good fun hat for the Kentucky Derby Day?
So I'm in part of a local writers group, and they threw me a surprise party, and
Oh,
so they
that's
have
awesome.
hats. Yeah.
That's so cool. I love that. I love that. Do you have, like personally, do you have a background with horses yourself?
No.
Okay, so you were literally working from like square one. Like I don't even know anything about horses all the way up to
Yep.
the Kentucky Derby. Okay, good for you. You're braver than I am. Oh, funny. Okay, so I have to ask because I love asking these types of questions. Um, did you find yourself interested in one specific aspect of the horse world and the Kentucky Derby? Was it the horses? Was it the risk? Was it the training? I mean, what part did you find yourself going, this is really intriguing?
I think it was the actual race day.
Okay.
It's because you have so much leading up to it, and I didn't think about all that goes beforehand. So
Hmm.
by race day, I was like, okay, what's going to happen? Like, even as I'm writing the book and
Okay.
I'm writing certain races, I'm like, does he win? Does he not? Like, what's going to happen? I don't know, but I'm excited just as the characters were anticipating it.
Yeah.
So because I really had no idea if I was going to
Hmm.
make the horse win or not to go
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so you have transracial adoption. Let's talk a little bit about that. Tell me some of the reasons you wanted to include that in the book and why it's important to parallel that with like the journey of the horse racing. And you mentioned earlier, there's not as much influence of African American in the horse world, if I'm saying that correctly. Um, so tell me a little bit about that thought process.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, oh man, I was thinking, how did someone come to own a horse?
Okay.
Because they're expensive,
Yeah.
right? They're not cheap. They're not pets. So some, I mean, it's so complex,
Okay.
but they're expensive. And I was thinking, how could she, what made sense to me, how she ended up there. And to me, it made sense that she was adopted.
Okay.
Um, and I've also seen this a lot where someone's adopted by white parents and then they
Mhm.
struggle with their identity.
Yeah.
Um, and I've always been interested in how that person felt. Just because my own background, I have been in spaces where I was a minority, I was the only African American.
Okay.
Um, and I wonder how much more that feeling compounds when your parents
Mm,
aren't your same race.
right.
And then two, for the parallels with the horse world, there's so much knowledge and so much history of African American jockeys.
Hmm.
There's been African American trainers, but as far as an African American being the owner of a horse,
Hmm.
I just couldn't find that much information in that arena. So
Okay.
I wanted her to be the horse
Yeah.
owner, not the
Yeah.
trainer, not the jockey,
Yep.
um, reach for that glass ceiling kind of thing.
Totally.
And so I like the fact that Piper adopts the horse, right? To her, it's not just a transaction, it's just not business, but it's her adopting the horse, just like
Hmm.
she's been adopting, and them both finding their footing in the space they're in. Him and the horse in the horse world, and her navigating as the owner in the horse
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. I love that you had her reach for the glass ceiling. I like that. I think that's superb. That's epic because I think a lot of people will relate to that need to find who they are in the arena that they're in,
Right.
and wanting to achieve the level of their dreams that they want to achieve versus being knocked down to something that, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, and then we have Piper and we have Tuck. Now, Tuck, is he African American or is he Caucasian?
He's Caucasian.
Okay. All
Yes.
right. This is
So there are a little interracial romance in there
huh?
as well, because I don't have enough, right?
We'll just keep
Um,
complicating things with the story and get it deeper, deeper. I love it.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
Tuck, he comes from a line of horse trainers. His
Okay.
dad was a horse trainer, his grandfather was a horse trainer.
Hmm.
And so he loves it. And so he feels a class issue. He doesn't feel the race issue,
Okay.
but he feels the class issue because his dad used to work for Piper's parents.
Okay.
Now he ends up working for Piper.
Mm,
So he wrestles with not feeling good enough. Can he
okay.
be a provider? Can he give her things that she can't get on her own?
Hmm.
Like basically, what can he bring to the table?
Sure.
Um, because he doesn't feel that just his heart and his feelings is quite enough.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. My some relatives of mine have dabbled, I shouldn't say dabbled, they've been in the horse world for quite a long time, but more out west, so it hasn't involved like derbies and things like that. But there really is when you get into horse ownership and a horse society, so to speak, almost a hierarchy, I've
Yeah.
noticed, of owners versus my horse is best, and almost kind of like a royalty within the horse world. Am I right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And that's honestly what I was going for.
Okay.
So when I transitioned from writing my actual royal books to the Love in the Spotlight series,
Mhm.
I wanted to make the characters royal in their arena, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
In the first book, I had the famous actor. He was royalty in Hollywood. And
Hmm.
then now I've got Piper, who came from a family who's royal in the
Hmm.
horse world,
Hmm.
and Tuck feeling that underling
Yeah.
feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I really think it's great that you're doing also an interracial romance. I think we need to see a lot more of that in books because it is very real in our society, and that representation I think is cool. I like that a lot. So,
Yeah, definitely. And I get readers who thank me for showing interracial romance because that's their story and they love
hmm.
seeing that representation.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. Um, I think this entire story sounds super exciting too. So I'm not going to ask, but I'm going to ask, like, does her horse win? That's my big question.
Do you really want the answer or do
No,
you?
no, I
Okay.
don't, because no one would ever listen to my podcast again. They'd be like, no, Jamie Joe does spoilers on her podcast.
I know, right?
Yeah,
No, you'll have to read the story and find out.
that's great. That's great. So if you were going to have a reader pick up this novel and you wanted them to get one thing from it that they could take away, like a deeper meaning type thing. And I realize it's a romance, so you're not necessarily going into the deep depths. But, if you wanted them to step away and say, oh, okay, that changes the way I think, or that affects my life, or that affects how I view God, what would you want it to be?
Um, that God is in the details.
Mm,
He cares about your plan, but ultimately his plan is bigger, and that you can surrender your plan knowing that he has good things for you.
mhm. That was a very concise answer. Like I'm like, mm-hmm, and I'm waiting. I'm like, wow, she wrapped it up in a nutshell. I love that. I love that. Yeah, it's so true though. I mean, you think about and you talk about your characters struggling with identity, and both of them are struggling in different platforms and different levels, and even in different arenas, race versus kind of the caste system of the horse life and all of that. And then having God in those details, and none of those details are a mistake. It's
Right.
exactly what it's supposed to be.
Yep. They're not a surprise to him. I think we forget that in our own feelings, we're like, oh, I didn't know this was coming, or
Mm,
how did this happen to me?
yeah.
And we feel like it's a mistake or, it's a surprise,
Hmm.
but it wasn't a surprise for God. Like he knew exactly what was going to happen. And I think having that knowledge then allows us to view
Hmm.
our own experiences in a different lens. Like
Yeah.
you can rest in the fact that nothing was a surprise to him and that there is going to be a purpose going forward, like
Yeah.
journeys mapped out.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's huge. And I think being able to identify your person with who God values and what his intention was in creating you can help change that perspective of whether you belong or not. The
Yeah.
belonging is no longer in the environment. The belonging is who you are in the eyes of your creator. Um, and I think that's extremely important, and people relate to that on a lot of different levels. So
Yes.
I always feel that way when involved in I'm thinking about the Kentucky Derby and how miserable I would be there because I'm always like this country girl. I walk in, I'm like, I don't know nothing. And backwards, and I'm wearing a hoodie and a pair of cutoff shorts and some rain boots because it's what we wear when we walk outside to protect from the ticks in the yard. And then you go to these places and there's all this high society and culture, and I'm just like, I feel completely out of my league. But it's interesting how not only do you feel out of your league, but you feel less than,
You're right.
you
Yes.
know?
Because you're supposed to know something
Yep.
and somehow you don't. And so obviously people are going to be looking at you and
Mhm.
judging you. But I mean, usually we're all wrapped up in our own heads to judge someone
A
else.
lot of that. I know. That's why I'm kind of like, Somebody asked me once, why do you always wear hoodies and don't do your hair on your podcast? I'm like, I've given up trying to put on a facade. It is what it is.
But no, I actually appreciate that about you because I was tired this morning when I got up and I'm like, oh, I'm doing a podcast. What am I going to wear? And I'm like, it's Jamie Joe. I'm wearing a t-shirt.
There you
Thank
go.
goodness.
And which I love your t-shirt. Hashtag step into a Shiloh book. That's great.
Thanks.
Oh, well, I love your books, and I probably don't always word my questions right, but I really appreciate the fact that you're bringing diversity within fiction, not just for representation, but also for um, people like me who don't necessarily have that exposure to all those different ethnicities, being in little rural Wisconsin, where it's just, if you're German, you understand what's going on around here. If you're not German, you don't got it, It's beer and it's cheese and hot dogs and brats. That's what we have around here. So everybody has their little corner of the world. And
Yes.
I love one of the things that I love about your books for readers who haven't read your books is not only do you bring in diversity, but you don't necessarily make a point with it. You're just bringing it in as natural. And some of your worlds are fictionalized, some of them are the Kentucky Derby. But it's just so refreshing for me to read your books and just enjoy the diversity that God created and love seeing all those different elements come together and learn along the way. Like it never would have dawned on me until you were bringing it up, and I read it, I think, in some other interviews, that a lot of African American isn't associated with the horse world. Like didn't it didn't connect in my head for ignorance or whatever reason. And I was kind of like, really? That's
Yeah.
interesting, you know? And I don't know why that is, but I think it's great that you're merging them.
Yeah, it's kind of my own way to educate and to
Yeah.
learn and to experience diversity myself because, like you said, we're all in our own corners.
Hmm.
Um, but writing a book allows me to write in my corner and see how other people live. And it's great because I always find someone in whatever area I'm planning a story who can, show me what it's like to be there. And then
Mm.
I think it helps the authenticity
Yeah.
in the story.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. And as a side note, I was adopted too. Um, and I just love any stories that have themes of adoption in them. I just think they're great. No matter what the story is, it's like, yes, adoptee, go.
I was so nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, please don't let me feel offend anyone who's been adopted. Like,
Oh, yeah.
there's always that worry.
Oh, there is, and I always worry too when I'm doing interviews like this and we're talking about interracial things. I'm like, I'm probably going to word something wrong or say something really ignorant, and I don't mean it. My heart's in the right place, but I think it's great that people explore the different topics, even if you're not totally familiar with them. And um, like, as an adoptee, granted, I wasn't interracial adoptee, but just having that representation is good. And I love, love, love the fact that she's str you're recognizing her struggle with identity. Hers is probably even more so, like you said, with the background of white parents and a child that's a different race than mine would have been. But that's something that's extremely real as
Right.
being an adoptee. And a lot of people, I don't know, unless you've experienced adoption, like I'm 40 something. I'm 40 something, and I still struggle with abandonment issue. That question of, okay, when are you leaving? Like, there's always that, when are you leaving? Am I good enough? Do I need to perform to make sure that you don't sign a paper and send me away? It's all that ingrained stuff that's you don't even realize is psychologically in your head just from that one instance of being misplaced from where you were supposed to be and then moved into another home where really is where God intended you to be. But it
Right.
still has that weird feeling. And so I appreciate the fact that you allow your character to work through some of that identity question on multiple levels again.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think everyone can relate, even if you've never been adopted. We all have identity struggles in some way or the other.
Yeah.
So um for me, it was it was good to get outside myself,
Hmm.
uh, to see how someone else could struggle with identity. Um, and I feel like it just grows empathy, when you
Yeah.
go through it with your characters.
Hmm.
And then as a reader myself, when I read other people's stories, I'm like, I didn't know that, or that
Yeah.
makes complete sense now that I see it in black and
Yeah.
white.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Awesome. Well, the book is called A Run at Love. It is available now from Bethany House Publishers. You can get it at Target, but you don't have to go to Target. There's other places you can get it from too.
But if you do give it at Target, tag me in a picture. I would love to see that.
Yes, yes. Do you have a specific hashtag to use for that too?
So if you're on Instagram, it's just step into a Shiloh book.
Step into a Shiloh book. All right. It's worth stepping into too, just for anybody who has not stepped into one yet. Do it and do it fast. I love Toni's books. I loved her books before she became my publishing house sister at Bethany House Publishing, and I will always be a Toni Shiloh cheerleader. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.